Hello and welcome to another episode of CollectaThoughts, the show where I collect my thoughts on video games, and today we're going to be talking about Game Dev Tycoon, a game that I was quite nostalgic about, and so I decided to replay it recently, and so I'm here now to talk about it. And honestly, my rose-tinted glasses have definitely been shattered for this game. Not to start on a negative note, but I definitely think this game is not as interesting as it once was. But for starters, let's explain what this game is. Game Dev Tycoon is a game where you make games in a very management simulator kind of way, where you decide what games you want to do and what platform they go on, and you have control over marketing and things of that sort. But of course, you're not actually making a video game. It is not a game making simulator, it's like a game studio simulator. Like you're the CEO, even though you technically play as one of the developers. And what was so interesting at the time about Game Dev Tycoon was that it was kind of the first game to do it. Nowadays, I'll be honest, there is quite a lot of games like this, even if they follow different genres. But even in just the game making area, there is quite a lot of copycats since then, and even some of them might do it better. I'm not sure, I haven't played them. But regardless, this video is about Game Dev Tycoon, and the way this one works is once you start the game and you give yourself a name and your company a name, you start making games. This process works by picking a game name, its genre, and its theme, this being something like horror, medieval, hospital, things like that. You get a random selection of them at the beginning of the game, but you can research new topics as a game mechanic. And of course, the next thing is also picking a platform the game runs on. But of course, though, we don't have real video game brands or console brands, we have parody names, which don't really go for the funny and just go to the try to understand what this is. Like there's a computer called the GD64. I wonder what that could be. Or maybe even more obvious, the Play System. I wonder what that one is. Mbox 360, anyone? So it's fine. It's not really a game that's going for humor as it is to doing what it sells on the box of making you feel like you're producing video games. So after you've picked from this choices, you also get to finally make your game, and here basically you'll get pop-ups that will show you different types of video game things like engine, gameplay, and story quests. This will be 3 different bars, and you have to manage how much time you want to put into developing each one of those for any particular game. Of course, different genres of games demanding different levels of each one of these settings. For example, adventure games are a lot more focused on story and quests, while simulation games are a lot more focused on gameplay, of course. It helps a lot to have some understanding of video games, but it's also not particularly necessary. You can get there by trial and error, and also by another thing that you can do once you release a game, and that is write a report on the game. The information you get from this report will retain after you've restarted your game, since this is a game that you either finish or go bankrupt. Your basic goal being making money, of course. Regardless, as you do different runs, the game becomes easier and easier as you do more of these reports and are more aware of what each game needs, allowing you to get better scores. Once you finish a game, your game will be reviewed by critics, and based on that you can get an idea of how much money you'll make. Obviously, you want to get high scoring games so you can get more money to develop more games, and also upgrade your studio. Upgrading your studio goes from getting more research and more topics for your games, but even beyond that, even more specific things that also allow you to make an engine. Making your own engine is very important in this game because it is what allows you to do much more complex games. The ability to add things like cutscenes, saves, and things of that nature that allow your games to get better scores, but more importantly, to keep up with the technology. As if you try to just keep doing the same games forever, you will eventually just go bankrupt, as this is really not a game about making your own small indie studio as it is about making the most profitable bigger studio that you can, especially as you reach certain landmarks where it allows you to upgrade your studio to then start managing and hiring new people, which will help you make bigger games. And that's kind of the game loop here. You make a game to try and make money, to try and upgrade the company so you can make bigger games that make more money so you can upgrade your company even further, of course. Later on, having abilities such as marketing and even how much you want to spend at your E3 presentations being choices that can be made here. And honestly, I found this loop to be very repetitive returning back to this game. The gimmick of making your own game, giving it a name, choosing its theme and genre does die off quite quickly because it is, at the end of the day, quite shallow. You're really just picking two genres that you think will mend well so it gets a better score, and not so much you want to kind of have fun with it and make a hospital action game or a werewolf simulator. Doing more out there things, or what I would call more fun things, will only lead you to lose money, which is directly against the objective of the game. Like I said again, you can't just be some small indie studio like the one that made this game. And in that, it does kind of just become capitalism simulator. What I saw before as an interesting reflection of the video game market does just kind of feel like, again, a capitalism simulator, which I guess isn't completely wrong, but it also diminishes some of the other things that I think this game does well towards that point of making a statement about the industry. Like, for example, how much of it is predicted on luck. For example, sometimes you'll get asked to do an interview before one of your games comes out, and that immediately makes the game sell a lot more. This interview is completely at random, and of course it adds a whole level of luck to it, because this advantage could be the difference between you doing a critical upgrade and, just kind of doing another game that does a minimal amount of money. And honestly, I like that. Sure, it's a bit annoying from a gameplay standpoint, and it probably adds to my boredom with this game, especially in a run where I don't get any special advantages or I just don't get that many interviews, and so my development early on in the game is quite slow. But the thing is, the whole game is slow because the loop is kind of boring. You just make a new game and try to manage the development time for each game. That's about it. For example, there's this feature when you're developing a game that is called bugs. Bugs go up while you're developing the game, but they go down if you let your developers work on it after finishing the game, which basically means you're polishing the game before it releases. And the thing about it is, only very late in the game do you have enough bugs per game to warrant considering releasing a game with bugs or not, since early on in the game it's always best just to wait until you get rid of them all, since it won't take all that long. The difference later on with them being a lot more is of course that you have to still keep paying your developers, which means them working on a lot of bugs may take some time, which may increase the spending of money, which makes sense. And the other thing is, while the game doesn't release, hype for it also goes down. Hype is something that early on you can't really play with. It kind of just shows up when you do an interview, but this is usually based on how many fans you have and how much marketing you do for the game, creating this hype, which of course is fundamental to selling a lot of games. Which again, a nice commentary, but again, it doesn't really make the game a whole lot more fun. The loop is still pretty much the same. You're just managing another number. It also doesn't help that the game is quite bland to look at. Even though you're making games, you never see any of them besides their genre. In the menus and in your history, they're always just defined as the score they got next to the platform they were released on. I think if this game had more art to it, more graphics, I think it would have helped a lot. Instead, it just feels like you're looking at an office, just like any other office, except they have some gaming things on the side that no one will ever interact with because the characters never leave the place where they're sitting. Even when they go on vacations, they just kind of turn into a ghost. It does feel kind of lame to look at, I guess. And that's kind of the thing. Even though you're upgrading, even though you're making more money, you're growing, you're making bigger games, you never feel it. It just kind of feels like you're doing the same thing again and again with slightly more choices that make it slightly more complicated. There's never a moment of immersion. To me, I was always just looking at a pseudo spreadsheet of numbers going up. And I think that got quite boring, like I said, after a lot of the novelty of this game wears off, which I think happens very early on. I still understand why I liked this game when I was younger, but I also noticed why I had almost forgotten everything about it since then. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever be returning to it again. And so, because of that, I am giving Game Dev Tycoon a 5 out of 10. I think if you got this game for less than $5, I honestly don't think you'd be mad at it. I don't think you'd have a bad perception on it at all, because you'd probably get, your 1 or 2 playthroughs out of it and be fine. But as a reviewer who had to play this game until I finished it, it was quite tedious and I was quite bored by it. And honestly, I don't really feel bad saying that, mostly because I have been playing another game that's insanely boring and I'm enjoying it a lot more than this. So there's definitely something that this game is not doing right, even if it was purposefully boring, I think, even though I don't think it is. I think if you like spreadsheets, maybe you'll like this game. Maybe if you like optimizing things a lot, maybe you'll like this game. But maybe you'll also realize how easy it is to optimize, because the game only cares about one thing really, and that is high scoring games and money. Regardless though, I don't think I would recommend it. And regardless of whatever your decision is to play it or not, I hope you can consider subscribing, liking, commenting, and now even disliking all the things you can do for free here on YouTube. And regardless of that, if you're a video game developer, I really hope you're not overworked, because I definitely overworked my characters in this game. And regardless of that, I hope you're having a good day, and goodbye.